but please let us be prospectively contrasting in this sense. Control is not be exerted upon women and children in wealth, by us, or mere infantile abuse otherwise. But otherwise, my abuse of them, is defined in contrast to what is not susceptible or receptive perceptually or existentially, one's ability to be psychologically and perspectively, and in general strain and animosity from the time, contrast themselves at where she defined her control in reality. The feeling of recoil, is what her control is, not exertion by nerds. A reality is being unresponsive and triggers conniption. At agency not being defined at the security of the right to be that connected, and in control. The basis for human rights advocacy, were taken from them, at that note. The truth is we don't find ourselves being this coherent with the issues post-COVID. Up until this point, a rather unnuanced dedication to manifesting and enforcing from those expulsions and pretensions, and the time's permissiveness, power itself, had been an empowerment to a feminine nefarious as virtue. I describe this with sentience other places. The idea was force us into a measure of our worth, by nullifying abstract thought as it was generalized as the source of an inconvenience. So is standing apart from a frame understood intentionally. When someone gave the signal to execute the gesture of asserting itself publicly, after I destroyed my phone, and the thing that was in the way no longer was, I witnessed the contrast of yourselves distinguish themselves, when you told them to leave you alone. A reality had broken down at that moment, a power did not function the way it was offered, so a panic ensued. And it also ripples in consequence gradually. I'd like to take a moment to note that when this event transpired, Roe vs. Wade had been overturned just a matter of days prior. This was not my wish, though given the dauntingness of those moments, the nature of the change I would imagine looked and felt as though they were synonym. All reasonings were second nature, being focal and projecting it onto things in isolation on behalf of those respects to create it. When it did not work, they turned to their allies, except everyone had invested in that as well. Control, visceralness, confusion and disorientation came from the places no one was even looking. But the solution to preserving themselves as the feminism of the time went back to what was only instinctive, everything that made them asset to that isolating to begin with. Thus, women's rights had rendered themselves incapacitated, and had not saved enough outside of the box thinking to bypass themselves. There is a triangle of focal control and insistence that can't see itself. A young angst's instinct to be control, and purge experience, on behalf of a preservation, and tolerance. A religious opportunism about that, wanting to be the tolerant obviously. Focal and general impressing of ourselves, and onto thought by overconfidence against what is merely the origin of their nature and self-awareness, and what will manifest either way, but in order to compensate for that they would have to acknowledge development. And around and around. Thus, the time's intentions about controls have reached impasse, period. It doesn't possess anything but our impulsive choking. And it shows in the way things are forced to be simple. There is a box to think outside of, but it requires a compromise in first words for where we've assumed we keep the respect, so that the nature of that which is, where we are, who we are and that which asks, can retain openness and the nuance to go with it, so that the room can be made to ask that, whilst still being able to acknowledge our qualities. The pretext, if not only size of life, to the reason why tolerance can be better than the worst intrinsically, and hold its ground with reason, and truths. But for now, moments in a day in that which experiences should be the world as it requires understanding, if my nature and your truth are the only purposes there, we cannot find you. Accept that, and both natures and truths are there at the same time. Respect is a given from where it is. Humans being human. On that note I'd like to take a moment to add one more thing. I am not a please kill that person's weirdness because I am contrivant with him kinda guy, I am an, I said no, please demonstrate integrity kinda guy. We see what we want to see, all of us, no one is exception. It's troublesome and colorful, we best understand it as it happens. We are almost heathen,